The Ultimate Fighting Championship is making history this weekend in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. In the main event, it is Israel Adesanya taking on Nassourdine Imavov in a massive fight in the middleweight division. Plus, you have Shara Bullet back in the octagon as he takes on Michael Venom Page in a very, very important night at 185 pounds. But first off, do want to mention, I should have mentioned this before and didn't, but in the women's flyweight division, it'll be Jasmine Jasduvicius taking on Mayra Bueno Silva in what will be the first UFC women's fight in Saudi Arabia. That there's obviously a lot that goes with that sort of a statement, and there is a lot of it's about time and that sort of a thing. But I do want to commend the UFC for doing that, and congratulations to Jasmine and to Mayra Bueno Silva for being able to put on that sort of an event. And we said that was one of the big fights to watch on this fight card. On the undercard, couple fighters hanging around that top 15 in need of a victory. Jasduvicius is 35 years old out of St. Catharines, Ontario. She is 12-3 in her UFC career, riding a 3-fight winning streak, coming off of a loss against Tracy Cortez back in 2023. She bounces back with a submission win back in January, almost exactly a year ago. Then comes up with a unanimous decision win in July against Fatima Klein, no relation, and wraps up the year in Edmonton in November with a submission win over Ariane de Silva. So some good work here from Jasduvicius as she has moved up again into the top 15. But she isn't tough against Mayra Bueno Silva out of Brazil with a record of 10-4-1 with one no contest. But it's been a bit of a tough go for Bueno Silva lately. She has lost back-to-back fights, a unanimous decision loss against Raquel Pennington in Toronto for the vacant UFC Bantamweight Championship, and then followed that up with a loss against Macy Chiasson, a doctor stoppage at UFC 303 in June. Before that, she had lost, or it wasn't a loss, I guess, it was just a no contest in a fight against Holly Holm. She did win that fight, but then tested positive for acid, some kind of an acid. I was going to say acid, just thinking like, oh yeah, it's I'm melting, but then realized that there's an actual drug like that, and I don't know what that actually was. So, but before that, she had won 3 fights in a row against Lena Landsberg, Stephanie Egger, and Wu Yanan. So this is a classic one where Bueno Silva, when she faces that kind of step up in competition, it doesn't go well for her. She's lost to Fioro, she's lost to Raquel Pennington, and she has lost to Macy Chiasson. So the question is Jasduvicius someone who would account for being one of those top fighters? Like I said, she has worked her way into the top 15. She has a couple of finishes in that stretch. She's won 5 of her last 6 and comes into this one at 12-3 with 5 finishes on the 12 victories. Like I said, 2 finishes in her last 3 wins, though, is quite impressive. And for Silva, again, she has a couple of submission wins as well. I like Jasduvicius. Canadian fighter, got to get behind the Canadian fighters. I just don't think that she is quite on the level of Bueno Silva. It seems harsh, and it seems almost too simplistic, but that is just kind of where I come down on this one. I just feel like Bueno Silva is a level above, and those losses have just come against fighters that are, I think, a tier above where Jasduvicius is. And so I am going Bueno Silva in this fight. I do think that there is a level that Jasduvicius can get to, but I don't think it is going to be in this one. So I just think it's a tough style matchup for Jasduvicius. I think a lot of stuff that she does well, Bueno Silva does well as well. So it's going to be a bit of a tough one for here. Sorry, just trying to, while we're doing this, pull up the odds for these bouts. Definitely should have done that before we got going. So, that thing that I said before about, oh yeah, this is one of the best months we've had on the channel. and that's with professional stuff like this. Imagine when I actually get my shit together, how good things are going to be. So, interested that Jasduvicius is that big of a favorite at minus 222. Think there's an underdog play here with Bueno Silva at plus 185. And I understand like Bueno Silva has lost a couple in a row and it hasn't looked awesome, but I do just think that she is just a little bit of a level above Jasduvicius. So I think maybe potential for a little bit of value in that particular bout. Other fights of note on this one, Said Nurmagomedov taking on Vinicius Oliveira. We've talked before about Nurmagomedov trying to break through there. I think that he is a significantly better fighter than Oliveira is. I don't think that there is a whole lot that needs to be broken down here, although the odds are a little bit closer than I was anticipating with Nurmagomedov only at minus 161. So, again, I don't love anything beyond minus 150, but I think that just based off of how much better I think Nurmagomedov is than Oliveira, I think that there is an opportunity there from a gambling standpoint. Heavyweight division, Sergey Pavlovich taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. For Pavlovich, at 32 years old, it feels like he's just been in our lives for a really long time to be 32 years old. Coming off back-to-back losses, but again, against Tom Aspinall and Alexander Volkov. Before that, wins over Curtis Blades, Tai Tuivasa, Derek Lewis, among others. Had a pretty good win streak going there before, after losing to Alistair Overeem. Decision loss in his last one against Volkov. Hadn't needed the judges' scorecards in a really long time. It was between 2017 and the middle of 2024 for Pavlovich. Going up against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, someone who had a lot of people's attention for a little bit, but has run into some problems. Remember, he was 10-0 to start the career, and then he takes on Francis Ngannou, and he loses in 20 seconds, and it seems like it's kind of spiraled on him a little bit. Beats JDS, loses to Cyril Gane. Beats Sakai, loses to Blades and Volkov, beats Christakis, loses to Almeida, beats Gaziev and Tuivasa, now going into a fight here with Pavlovich. Again, this is another one where I just view Pavlovich as a step above, and someone who I don't think that there should be a whole lot of an issue for Pavlovich in this particular bout, and I just don't, from a wagering standpoint, there isn't a whole lot of value on this one. Pavlovich to win by knockout is minus 263. So the odds makers are in line with us on that one. Then we get to the two big fights at the middleweight division. It is Shara Bullet taking on Michael Venom Page. I am very intrigued by this one because I think these are two fighters who have similar styles, very different expectations, but do come in kind of at the, like, it's, I was going to say they come in at the same kind of like popularity rating, but I don't think that's it at all. It's the expectations are higher for MVP. The, I guess, Q rating for Shara Bullet is way up here, and their skills are probably even. So it's a very intriguing fight when it comes to this sort of a thing. I think this is going to be an all-action fight. I think this is going to probably go down, boxing and UFC combined. I think this is going to go down as one of the fights of the weekend, probably the best fight of the weekend that we get here. I think MVP is just a little bit better suited for that. I think he has faced significantly better competition than Magomedov has. And while Bullet is very creative with his striking, so is MVP. But again, he's done it at higher levels. And now, higher levels in different promotions that aren't as high as the UFC. But I think if you just went fight for fight, resume for resume, it is significantly over on the MVP side of things. And so I think that this is a fight that we see Michael Venom Page get back on track in. I think that, again, his striking is just at a bit of a different level than it is for Shara Bullet. And again, this is one where we differ on the odds makers. MVP at plus 150 right now, with Shara Bullet at minus 182, and even MVP to win by knockout plus 600 is, I think, an interesting one. Maybe it is over for MVP. Maybe it just, he does not have it anymore. You don't think of him as kind of an over-the-hill guy or anything like that, but he's 37 years old. And he has kind of bounced around a little bit. Now, he is fighting in the middleweight division, which is a weight class above above what he has fought at in the past, fighting for the welterweight championship in Bellator, and so far just fighting at welterweight in the UFC. So that will be interesting to see where that power kind of goes to for him, and that's going to be very interesting. He has fought at middleweight before, back in 2013 in the Super Fight League. He won by rear naked choke. That was his 5th fight in his career, part of a very good start to the career that saw a bunch of wins in the first round in a row, before he ultimately does get tested and loses to Douglas Lima. As we've said before, he has bounced back in big ways. So there is some concern about where does that power carry? How does that power work going up to 185 pounds. Quick shout out, Deeds. Yeah, thank you. Doing my own thing, gaming on Twitch, so have a great stream. Sorry that we are streaming at the same time, my guy. Apologies for that. But yeah, you have a great stream as well, Deeds. Thank you so much for popping in and appreciates the support as always. So yes, I'm very interested to see what MVP does up in the middleweight division. But let's take a look at kind of the measurables. It is MVP at 6'3", again, normally coming in at 170 pounds, but this one going to be 185. He has a 79-inch reach advantage. Sorry, not reach advantage, just reach. I do that a lot, and I shouldn't. Magomedov, 30 years old, 6'2", with a 73-inch reach. So MVP is still going to be the bigger guy here. And he is just, I think, set up well for middleweight. So I don't think it's going to be a problem going up to the heavier weight class. I think this is a really fun fight. I think it's a really intriguing one. But in the end, I think MVP just a bit too advanced on the feet for the guy who goes by Shara Bullet. Deeds. Oh, good. You have a schedule. I mean, I should, but it bounces around. I don't stick to it. I said it and then I don't stick to it, but trying to get better at that. We go to the main event. It is Israel Adesanya taking on Nassourdine Imavov. This one, again, gigantic. When you are looking at the stakes and what is on the line for these two guys, we laid it out in the kind of primer that we did at the start of the week. This is a fight for relevancy for both. Israel Adesanya is probably the second best middleweight in the history of the sport, behind Anderson Silva, and a phenomenal champion. A one-time pound for pound number 1 in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. But he's lost 3 of his last 4, and back-to-back fights. He lost the middleweight championship, and then tried to get it back, and couldn't. The last time he fought in a fight that was not for a championship, you have to go all the way back to February of 2019, when he beat Anderson Silva back in Melbourne, Australia. He won by unanimous decision. He then gets a shot at the interim title against Kelvin Gastelum, and we are off and running. But now, it is again, back-to-back losses. He has lost 3 of his last 4. If we want to be talking about championship fights, if we want to be talking about mega fights, this is the fight that has to get him back on track. It has to be a win, and honestly, it probably has to be a little bit impressive. For Imavov, he is 29 years old, out of Dagestan. He has fought at welterweight, middleweight, and light heavyweight, accumulating a record of 15 wins, 4 losses, and 1 no contest. That no contest coming back because of a accidental clash of heads at UFC 289 in 2023. Since then, he's won 3 fights in a row, beating Brendan Allen, Jared Cannonier, and Roman Dolidze. He had a step up in competition before, losing to Sean Strickland in the light heavyweight division back in 2023. He moves back down to middleweight, and there are some problems for him. I guess there's... Again, it's the clash of heads, and then there was a deduction of a point for an illegal soccer kick. But he still won that fight, so there haven't really been problems. He's won, like I said, he's won 3 fights in a row, and is kind of building here. At 29, I don't want to say a loss here, and it's over. But it would be a bit of a pattern where, okay, step up, and then loss. And then build back up, step up, fight, and then loss. So for him, if he wants to ramp this thing up, and if he wants to get into the title picture, it has to be a win here this weekend. This is going to be the biggest stage that he is going to be on, and this is going to be one of the more high-profile fights that he is going to get. It is at a time where maybe Adesanya's skills don't necessarily match up with where the brand name is, and that is a phenomenal spot to be in if you are looking to kind of build your name off of that a little bit. The problem is, I still think Adesanya has it a little bit. Right? Like, I don't think he is just, like, completely washed by any stretch of the imagination. So let's break this one down. Imavov throws with power. That's one of the things when you go and watch And you see the resume for him. It is, I just want to get this exactly right. Like I said before, he is 15-4. He does have 6 knockout wins. So it's 10 finishes in 15 UFC fights. But his last 3 fights, only 1 finish. And 3 of his last 4 have gone to the judges' scorecards. And so, again, as we've kind of moved up in competition, the finishes have kind of stopped. And it's a little strange to see that because he does throw with a substantial amount of power. And if there's ground and pound, he throws with just vicious intentions. So there's a lot of power that comes in there. But the one thing, and we will harp on this in MMA forever, it's one and done a lot of the time. Now, it is one and done because there is some very impressive movement. It's a lot of like hit, out of the way, and some good head movement there. Like defensively, he's pretty good. Volume-wise, he's kind of middle of the pack. It's around 4.5 strikes, landed per minute. The upper echelon fighters getting around, like the leaders in that category, I should say, are getting around 8 and 9. Now, there's some weight class stuff in there and all of that, but he's not going to put a ton of volume on you. It's not going to be a ton of combinations, but when he hits you, it sucks. So it's an interesting one because he is capable of putting a lot of that volume out there. And Israel Adesanya is a next level counter striker. But Imavov hits and moves really, really, really well. So that's what I think makes this a very interesting fight, is that Imavov, you hear Dagestan and you think, oh, he's going to take him down and try to elbow the piss out of him. And he might still. But that is not necessarily the game plan that is often thrown out there for Nassourdine Imavov. What he likes to do is dictate the pace, really push forward, and land those big shots and move and have those really big moments and try to wear you down that way. Adesanya, I think he's better when he's leading the dance, but he seems more comfortable when he is the one kind of counter-striking. The one issue is we've seen that start to slow a little bit. Like Sean Strickland really controlled the octagon against him in that title fight, and I think that kind of set a bit of a blueprint. Imavov, I don't know if he's going to have the patience to follow that necessarily. So I do think that eventually it's just going to be Adesanya's fight. He has more high-level experience, and I know we're leaning on that a little bit too much on this card, but he has way more high-level experience. He is just, I think, a higher-level striker than Imavov is, and so I think as the fight goes on, Adesanya is going to see these openings, see his opportunities, and really try to put it on the 29-year-old from Dagestan. The other thing that I did notice is that it gets really zombie-like and really sloppy when the gas tank starts to go a little bit for Imavov. And so I would not recommend a rope-a-dope technique from Israel Adesanya because I do think that there is a concern of just getting blasted in the face one too many times and, oh, hey, look at that. Now I have lost 3 fights in a row and things feel like they are spiraling a little bit. But I do think that the longer this fight goes, the more it benefits Israel Adesanya. And I just feel like the style that Imavov wants to stay in is a style that Izzy can thrive in. But is that the same Izzy? Do we get that piston-like counter-striking? Do we get the flowing striking ability of one of the best strikers to have ever graced the octagon here in the start of 2025? What does Izzy have left? The old Izzy, the former pound-for-pound champion, beats the shit out of this guy, quite frankly. Is that guy still there for Israel Adesanya? Or are we entering kind of a last chapter for the last stylebender? Going to be a really, really interesting fight. And then you add the stakes on top of it of how important this is for Israel Adesanya, how big of a fight this is for Imavov. It is just such an intriguing matchup here this weekend out in Saudi Arabia. My official prediction is Israel Adesanya. I do think that the judges will be required for this particular bout. And so Adesanya, like right now, over 4.5 rounds, minus 200. We're not getting much value there. Fight goes the distance, minus 179. We're not getting much value there. The odds makers making us make a pick on it. So we're going to go Israel Adesanya. It is minus 159, so we don't love that. I'm going to say Adesanya by decision. We get a nice little plus 140 on the old bingo card for Adesanya in that bout. So a few underdog plays and a few plus money plays that we get on this UFC Fight Night card. Going to be very interesting. And like I said before, going to be a historic bout coming up this weekend out in Saudi Arabia.